Hi, my name is Jeff Beam. I'm the Vice President of Global Product Marketing at QlikTech. And today I'd like to talk about the QlikView governance dashboard and the associated QlikView Expressor products and how they help IT play a critical role in rolling out business discovery across an organization. QlikTech is all about business discovery. It's about bringing business intelligence to business users across an organization. It's about delivering insight to the very edges of the organization so that business users, no matter where they are in a company, can define their own paths to insight and create their own new discoveries without relying on IT each step of the way. But IT still plays a very critical role in ensuring that business users have the right data and the appropriate data, and that they're using it in a way that's appropriate to make those business decisions. Often when people deploy QlikView across an organization, they'll start with a line of business that may build a couple of apps for answering some specific questions or getting visibility into some key business information. That information may be pulled from operational data sources, from data warehouses, from other apps that are within the organization, and those apps are rolled out very quickly, and business users get great value very quickly by using QlikView. Other business departments may then want to build other apps for their use. And pretty soon what IT discovers is that there may be multiple different apps across an organization that are pulling from common data sources. And they may have similar definitions about the data, about how that data is being extracted or pulled into those QlikView apps, about common business definitions such as profitability, and different groups may be creating their own definitions. And what IT finds is that there's a growing level of complexity in managing these multiple QlikView implementations. And so what starts out as being very simple for the business user and delivering great value very rapidly for business users across an organization starts to bring complexity for IT in their ability to support the business as they expand their QlikView usage. This is exactly where the QlikView Governance Dashboard and QlikView Expressor plug in. They help give that control, that discipline at the center of the organization while retaining the flexibility at the edges of the organization, allowing IT to have a better understanding and visibility into how data is being used across an organization, allowing IT to create reusable definitions and reusable rules about how that data is being pulled and defined and used by the organization, while in fact increasing the business user's ability to very quickly and flexibly answer their own business questions and define their own paths to insight. Before I get into a little bit more depth about the QlikView Governance Dashboard, I'd like to talk a little bit about metadata. Metadata is a very common term in the industry, and it's quite often very misunderstood. At its simplest level, metadata is data about data. It describes the data that the business users are seeing. And in many ways, you can think of metadata as being a bridge between the data and the applications and the IT infrastructure and the business users. It helps IT describe the data that the business users are going to be looking at and using to make their business decisions. So again, if at a simplest level, if you look at a document, a Word document, there may be metadata, things like who authored that document, when was it authored, who's allowed to see it, when was it last updated. These are all metadata elements that both IT and business users might find valuable as they use that document to make decisions. In the same way, if you look at business data that users are using to make business decisions, you look at, again, a term like profitability. Profitability has a definition of how is it defined, what data is being pulled in, what is the calculation that creates profitability, when was that data last updated. And it's important for both IT and business users to have an understanding of that definition and ensure there's consistency when profitability is used in multiple different applications. This is where metadata can really help out and give a common language that both IT and business users can use to describe the data that's driving business discovery. In QlikView and in QlikView deployments, there are many different types of metadata that business users and IT interact with. There's traditional metadata about the source systems or the data being used to drive business discovery. This metadata may include definitions of where the data came from, again, when it was last updated, the security about that data, etc. So there's a lot of source system metadata. There's also QlikView specific metadata. The QlikView apps themselves are rich with metadata. What is the name of this app? Who created it? What are the objects that are used in that app? What are the expressions that are used in that app? What is the frequency of updating the data in that app? Where is that app being deployed? On which server? What's the infrastructure of that app? Is that app a single QVW or QlikView file pulling directly from source systems? Or is it being based on the intermediary QVD or QlikView data file infrastructure? Lots of rich information that can both help business users and IT better understand and have confidence in the data that they're looking at. QlikView Governance Dashboard provides visibility and insight into that metadata in order to give better confidence and understanding to business users and IT alike. It gives it's presented as a QlikView app, and it allows you to see information about your QlikView deployment, such as how many QlikView apps do you have, what sheet objects are on that app, what expressions are being used, and it also gives information about where that data is coming from, what source systems are being pulled, what definitions are used to pull that data into QlikView, what downstream systems, what QlikView apps are using common definitions or common data sets, allowing IT to answer questions such as what data is being used by which app, what would happen if I were to change this source system, what data is potentially being misused by different apps, or what different definitions are being used in describing, again, a calculation like profitability. And this ultimately can lead to actions like creating a common and reusable definition, again, for something like profitability. Rather than having to redefine and risk creating different versions of profitability, I can create a single definition that I then reuse across all of my QlikView deployments. This results in a more disciplined approach to using QlikView and provisioning QlikView apps across an organization. Again, ultimately delivering that discipline at the core, where you're ensuring that the right data is being used in the right way, while also giving you the flexibility for business users to quickly create new apps and answer new questions and discover new paths to insight. Now, as I look into QlikView Governance Dashboard and start to use the system, what I can see here is that I get immediate ideas and insight about what data is being used in QlikView and how my QlikView apps are structured. I can see information such as how many QlikView apps do I have, what expressions are in those QlikView apps, what fields are being used in those QlikView apps, how many different QlikView apps I have, how many fields are there, what are the definitions of those fields. I can see things like expressions. What is the definition of that expression, and how many expressions do I have across my QlikView app? I can then start to see, again, if I focus in on something like profitability, I can see what is the definition of profitability in this QlikView app. And maybe there's a different definition of profitability in a different app because they're using it in a different context. Maybe they're applying a discount notion to that profitability for some reason. But yet it's being portrayed as profitability to that business user. And so I may be concerned that the business user is looking at two different apps and seeing profitability in both of those apps, but yet it's delivering different answers. And so I may want to understand what apps that is impacting. Where is that definition being used, and how do I ensure a more consistent delivery of a definition of profitability? Before I get into how we address that, you can also in here see what source systems are being used by these QlikView apps. Where is that data being pulled from that feeds that profitability definition or any other expressions or views of data that are appearing in my QlikView app? Once I've discovered a potential issue, such as multiple definitions of profitability, I can actually go into additional views in this QlikView app. The governance dashboard is actually just a QlikView app, and I can go in and see which specific apps, which sheet objects are using which definition. and I can use that as a way to then communicate back to the business owners or developers in that application, encouraging them to use a more standard or common definition for profitability. I can also go in and understand which apps are using which data sources, as I mentioned before, allowing me to understand that if I were to change that source system, what would be the impact? This is a common term in the industry called impact analysis. What would be the impact if I changed a source system? And again, the governance dashboard gives me great visibility into the potential impact of changes to source systems. And I can also understand data lineage. If I know there's a problem with a source system or out of date or inconsistent data, I can understand where is that data coming from, what source systems drew from this problem that I'm having. These are the sorts of things that I can do in the QlikView governance dashboard, giving me great visibility into how data is being used, where that data is being used across a QlikView deployment. Ultimately, what this does is it gives IT better control and understanding and ultimately governance of a QlikView deployment, giving better confidence and improving the accuracy of the information. It ultimately is a best practice for IT to understand this information and have that centralized governance. But at the same time, it gives developers and business users more confidence in that data as well. They know that the data that they're looking at has been centrally managed and is being provisioned in an appropriate way. Again, all leading back to this notion of discipline at the core of the QlikView deployment. Now, one of the other areas where the governance dashboard provides great value when combined with QlikView Expressor is if I do identify a calculation or an extraction or a common data use that is not being consistently used across a QlikView deployment, I can try to go back and improve how that data comes into QlikView and those definitions of data transformations and data imports into QlikView. Now, the common approach to do that today is through the QlikView scripting language, which is incredibly flexible and powerful for pulling data into QlikView. With QlikView Expressor now, what we have is a more graphical and metadata-driven approach to bringing data into QlikView. It provides a graphical Windows user interface that allows me to create a more graphical flow of that data coming into QlikView, allowing me to reuse common data operators, allowing me to create customized but reusable definitions of data extracts, of data transformations, of rules about what data should be brought in, how it should be cleansed or treated before it's brought into QlikView, and again allows me to do so in a much more graphical way, ultimately building up a library of reusable data elements, elements that describe, again, the extraction of data, the transformation of data, the loading of data into QlikView. So that ultimately what we have is potentially disparate, unstructured, dirty data coming out of various source systems being loaded into QlikView in a much more consistent, normalized, transformed manner. And along the way, I end up with this reusable library of active metadata, metadata that describes how that data comes out of the source systems, how it's transformed, and how it's loaded, so that as people create additional QlikView apps, they don't have to start from scratch. They can reuse these metadata elements that were created centrally, and they can ensure, again, that consistency of information flowing into QlikView. What this ultimately leads to is not only this reuse and easier design of flows of data coming into QlikView, but again, a better sense of confidence that the data is consistent across my QlikView apps, and ultimately better agility and flexibility for creating those next QlikView apps. Again, because I don't have to redesign or redevelop those definitions each time I create a new QlikView app, I can pull off the shelf the definitions that I've already created and reuse those, again, driving consistency as well as agility. So that is the new capabilities around the QlikView governance dashboard as well as around QlikView Expressor, ultimately providing flexibility at the edges of the organization, fulfilling the promise of business discovery, allowing business users to very easily get access to their information in a way that makes sense to them in a very self-service way, while also ensuring that discipline at the core of a QlikView deployment. With the QlikView governance dashboard, giving better understanding to IT about how that data is being used, where it's being used, and also providing developers with a powerful mechanism to create a reusable library of metadata-driven elements describing how that data is coming into and being transformed and applied to various QlikView applications.